4 weeks ago, Kevin hurt his back doing a squat in the garage. And for the first week, he did what most of us do. He tried to figure it out himself. He modified his training, he stretched, he waited, but nothing improved. He was in pain getting up from a chair, getting in and out of bed, and sitting for more than 5 minutes. And 1 week later, he finally asked for help. And within 3 days, he was running. Within 2 weeks, he was out of pain. And this past weekend, less than 3 weeks after we started, he ran 14 miles. So today, we're going to tell you exactly what he did, why it worked, and what that teaches us about how runners need to think about pain, movement, and the body's ability to heal. So stay tuned. What's up, Kev? Welcome to, what's up, Kev? Well, what's up, runners? Welcome to the episode today. Kevin and I are filming. We're recording this a little bit differently because our dog, again, was not cooperating. He does not, like, whenever Kevin is in the room, it feels like Jasper just wants to play. And so he was coming over and jumping on Kevin because normally we sit next to each other and record on the one computer. But this time we're recording on Zoom. And so hopefully I'm sure that the audio quality is going to be good. We'll edit it if we need to. But also we get to see each other. And so we're going to be able to put this video up on our YouTube channel as well. So that's kind of fun. So if you guys want to watch us talk to each other, you can go check us out on YouTube. All right. So the first thing that we want to talk about is give you guys a little bit of an update on Kevin's back. I know we have done a couple of different podcasts on this topic, but more around kind of the psychology of it and the difficulty asking for help and the mindset of both Kevin and me with this whole thing. And today we really want to talk more about the physiology aspect. We want to actually get into what we did physically to help Kevin essentially fix his back pain. I caution to use the word fix because back pain is one of those things that can come back, but hopefully it never will, but you never know. And the one thing that I really want to point out before we jump in is the things that we're going to be talking about today are the things that we did for Kevin. And Kevin's presentation of back pain might be different than what you are experiencing or you have experienced in the past. And so I don't want this to say, okay, this is a blanket statement that this is going to work for everyone, and this process that we're going to tell you about today is going to get rid of your back pain in 2 weeks. That's not what I'm saying. All right. I do think that what we're going to be talking about in today's episode is a universal thing. I think these are the three big principles that we're going to be talking about that you can apply to your training, but you might need more help. You might need some other additional things to address yours. And I'm going to be creating more additional resources surrounding pain, specifically surrounding back pain, because I think that the way that I typically address back pain with my patients is different than maybe what other people do. So, Kev, tell us a little bit.
Excellent background of this will not necessarily work for everybody, but on the other hand, Angie is a wizard. And I ran 14 miles over the weekend, and I would have done more, but thunder stopped me, not my back. Yeah. That's the weirdest thing. At no point in time during the run was I annoyed or feeling anything weird in my head. I had to have an awkward 30-minute break in the middle of it because thunderstorms were over the top and lightning was literally sitting on top of us. Yeah. But even when I restarted, I wasn't all tight and stiff and feeling weird. I just started running again, which was very different from my first few runs back couple weeks ago.
Yeah. And so why don't you just give them a little bit of a timeline, specifically when it came to your running, because we've talked about the psychological aspect of what happened with you, but physically speaking, let's give the listeners a little bit of a timeline.
Okay. So I hurt my back on a Monday, and I think I immediately took 2 or 3 days off from running because there was just no way. I was walking the dog still, so I was still moving, but walking the dog was painful. So I thought running was going to be real bad.
Yeah.
And then you suggested that running might not make it worse. So I gave it a shot. I tried to do our neighborhood, my normal running pace. And these are all just numbers, but they're numbers that kind of help explain paces and how uncomfortable I was feeling. I generally will head out and I'll run somewhere around 7 to 7:30 mile. And I was going out and I would walk for a couple minutes to get things moving, and then I would jog for 30 seconds, and then I'd take another walking break, and then I'd jog for about a minute, and then I'd take a little walking break, and then I could run. And that's how I did my first 2 miles. And it took me, I don't know, 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, I just pulled up your Garmin and it looks like you did that long 20-mile run on June 7th.
Yep.
And then your next run was June 11th, and you did 3 miles and then walked 2 miles at a slower pace. So it was about
No,
4 days
other
later.
order. I
Okay.
walked 2 miles because I
Okay.
walked the big loop of our neighborhood. And then I felt okay. And I think that walking 2 miles maybe even had some jogging in it. And so I was like, I'm going to go out and try to run a little bit. And my run was it was purposely designed as a run walk. And it felt stiff and uncomfortable the entire time. But that was also when I was just trying to deal with it myself. I've seen Angie deal with back pain herself. I'm going to do bridges and I'm going to roll around on a lacrosse ball. And I'm trying to think of what else I came up with in my own head. And so I think I was fishing for help without asking for help. We had done on a previous episode.
Yeah.
Of any little bits that you would possibly give me as suggestions, or I'd make comments about what I was doing, hoping that you would maybe give me one extra thing to do. And I don't think that I was doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really doing anything right. I wasn't going in. We've got a great podcast outline here of this is a good way to progress. I was doing random things.
So were you throwing spaghetti at the wall?
I was just going to say, it's similar to like when I cook. There's a recipe and I'll follow the steps, but the order I'm doing them in doesn't make any sense. And now instead of eating at 6:30, we're eating at 9 because I was like, oh, I probably should have preheated the oven. Or, oh, I forgot to do that. I also need to make sides. I was missing pieces. And so it was just going to take a really long time. I was still doing things. And I think maybe possibly 4 months out, it could have started improving. But there's just a much more efficient way of going at things.
Yeah. And so for us to help you guys understand what we did with Kevin and his back pain, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the anatomy and physiology of understanding what was going on in Kevin's back first. And then we'll get into kind of what we did and the 3 principles that we want you guys to take away, no matter what kind of pain it is, to be honest with you. So what we're going to be talking about today definitely applies to lower back pain, and it often applies to a lot of other different types of pain as well. So we're going to zoom out and generalize of how you can apply this to other things. So the first thing that you need to know is what kind of pain Kevin was having. Now, he hurt his back doing a squat. So it was at the bottom of a squat. Tell them specifically, Kevin, when you felt that pain.
I was almost done. And this is what drives me nuts being a month later and just having lost the rhythm and momentum of summer going is I think I was on my last or second to last rep of my 3rd set of squats. I was just so fatigued that I was at the bottom of the squat, ready to start pushing back up. And I just felt this stabbing pain in my lower back and still pushed up. I should have just racked it where it was, but I didn't. I pushed up. It was super uncomfortable. And then I just thought that bridges would fix it.
Yeah. And who knows? Maybe, I know you keep saying that, but I should never have pushed back up. I should have just let it be. But who knows? You could have done the damage already and maybe it didn't even matter. But
when I retell the story in my head, now there's a crunching sound that I heard.
Okay.
I have no idea. I think I've just added that to the story.
Our brains are so fun that way. But also that lifting session that you did was also after several other activities. So I want our listeners to understand too, it's not like it was just this one isolated session. There was the 20-mile run the day before, and then you pressure washed our entire driveway that was the patio, right?
I pressure washed the patio
Yeah.
and all of the tiling around the edge of the pool, which I think was what really did me in. Because
you had to kind of bend over to get to it.
Pressure washing the ground, you can stand there and do it, but you have to really lean and hunch and angle over to get where I was doing.
Yeah.
After I had run 20 miles.
Right.
And the squats were not the first exercise I did in my lifting session. It was mid-lifting session.
Yeah. So I want you guys to all understand, it's not like this was that one movement that just totally did him in. It was the combination of things over the 2 days, that 2-day period, that was likely what led him to this. And so
it wasn't just the squat, but it was in fact the squat that broke Kevin's back.
There you go. Perfect.
Thank you.
There you go. Wonderful. Now, Kevin never went and had an X-ray or an MRI, so I cannot say with complete certainty that there was no disc involved or any of that stuff. But what I will tell you based on my clinical expertise and the presentation of how Kevin was presenting, it's his SI joint, his sacroiliac joint that was the part of his lower back that was affected. So the sacroiliac joint connects the sacrum, which is the triangular bone at the base of the spine. So essentially, your spine is a stack of vertebrae. I always like to think of your vertebrae and your spine as like building blocks that are just stacked on top of each other. And at the base of that is a triangular shaped bone. It's an upside down triangle. So the base of the triangle is touching the spine, and the point of the triangle is pointing down. And that triangular bone both connects to the spine and it also connects to both sides of the pelvis. So it is a very important joint because there's two joints. There's a sacroiliac joint on the left and on the right. And then, of course, where the lumbar spine meets the sacrum as well. So it's a very important part of the body and part of the spine as far as force and load, like taking on load from the body. And it is not a highly mobile joint by design. It is a very strong joint. So the sacroiliac joints themselves, it's just two bones that are connected by very strong ligaments. And that joint is very stable because its job is stability and load transfer. So load transfer means it's taking all of the forces of the upper body and transmitting them down through the pelvis and into the legs, and then also transmitting ground reaction forces from the body all the way up through, or from the ground all the way up through the body. Are we on track so far, Kevin? Kevin's my monitor to make sure I'm not getting too sciencey here.
Yeah, I will help you translate anything. It bothers me on an innate going all the way back to high school level that it is my SI joint that bothers me.
Why?
Because my high school's rival high school was SI.
Really?
So yes.
That's
Yeah,
random.
because they were the other Jesuit school. So we were Bellarmine and they were
Perfect.
St. Ignatius. They were the other Jesuits. And it was a whole thing.
Okay. So far you're with me, right?
Yeah.
Does that description make sense? Okay. Now, runners are particularly susceptible to SI joint dysfunction for two main reasons. So first of all, running is a single leg sport. If you think about what running is, you're essentially jumping from one leg to another over and over again. And so every single time your foot hits the ground, you're essentially asking that leg and your pelvis to absorb that force while your other leg is swinging through. And so if your hip mobility is limited or that rotational control is poor because there's hip rotation happening while that leg is swinging through, then those forces get absorbed somewhere else. Okay. Whenever there's a restriction in the body, compensation happens. And so if one area is restricted, another area of the body will come in to take up the slack. And so the SI joint often becomes part of the body that is starting to take up that slack. The second piece that's involved here is the coupling pattern of the hip and the spine. And so I'm going to be getting into more detail of that a little bit later. But basically, what it means is that restriction anywhere in the chain gets compensated for somewhere else. And so the lower back and the SI joint, just because they're at the end of that chain, they're at the bottom of the spine, oftentimes they take a lot more of the pressure and the force. They take more than their fair share. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because everybody else just keeps passing the buck and you reach the end of the
Right.
line and
And there you are.
like, all right, fine, we'll deal with it.
And there you are. Okay. So the second thing, as far as Kevin goes, like when I was doing my examination with him, was the psoas muscle. So the iliopsoas is one of your main hip flexor muscles. So it's responsible for hip flexion and it's also pelvic and spinal stability here. Now,
Okay,
the
when you say
issue,
hip flexion, that literally means lifting your leg off the ground, right?
lifting your leg. Yeah. So like knee towards the ceiling or knee
Yep.
towards the air, right? So the thing with the psoas that makes this so connected to lower back pain is that the psoas actually originates on the front of the lumbar spine. So the part of your spine that's facing your belly button, that's where that muscle starts, and then it goes down and attaches into the femur, so into the thigh bone. So because it actually literally attaches to the spine, if that is tight or if there's restrictions there, it can pull your spine forward. Make sense?
That makes sense. That's
Okay.
why my back's all weird and curvy.
Right. And so because of that attachment and the anatomy here is like when that psoas is tight or if it's overactive, it not only pulls the hip into flexion, it pulls the leg up, it also pulls directly on the lumbar spine. And so that can increase anterior pelvic tilt, which means tilting your pelvis is tipping forward, which is increasing the arch in your lower back. And that puts your lumbar spine, the lower back, under sustained compression. And so when we analyzed Kevin's squat pattern, we found that anterior pelvic tilt was excessive at the top of his squat. His lower back was excessively arched before he even began the movement. And so that's going to put extra pressure on the extra pressure on the spine and the SI joint.
All right, so let me see if I can translate a little bit of what you, because every time you talk about the pelvic tilting, I get the words backwards.
Okay.
So this thing is super, super tight. It connects to my lower spine and it connects that to the top of my thigh bone. Since when I'm standing there, I'm not going to overcompensate by just lifting my leg off the ground. I could overcompensate by just always standing like a flamingo, but that's instead, I'm going to keep both feet on the ground, but I'm going to curve my back and stick my butt out behind me.
And so it's like sticking your butt out and tilting your pelvis forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've tried to go the other direction and it feels so awkward. It doesn't feel uncomfortable. It just feels so awkward.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So then that leads us to the next issue that we figured out with Kevin's squat. Cause like I analyzed his squat pattern to figure out like, why did this happen during the squat? And so Kevin started off with this anterior pelvic tilt. So that excess arch in the lower back with his hips tilted forward because of the tightness in his psoas, because of the weakness in the spine and the glutes. And then what would happen is Kevin then went from that excess forward tilt, and then at the bottom of his squat he went into an excess backward tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt. So the pelvis like tucked under him, and when that lumbar spine was like then undergoing an excessive amount of flexion under load. And so there was this alternating pattern of extremes. He had too much, like he had a big arch in his back at the top of the squat, and then that arch disappeared and that back was completely flattened out. The spine was flattened out at the bottom of the squat. And so there was too much extension at the top, too much flexion at the bottom. And so his lower back was just absorbing load that it wasn't designed to absorb. And so the SI joint was being stressed with every single rep that he was doing. Add in the fatigue that he was having because of the 20-mile run, because of the pressure washing, because this was the last set in his whole strength session, and his SI joint was just like, I'm done, tapping out here.
Yep, which is essentially what it did. It literally just tapped out, and then the rest of my body freaked out.
Right.
But okay, so the issue is I was excessive forward at the top and excessive backward at the bottom.
Yeah.
If I was one or the other, it would have put less strain on it.
Most likely. But the reason that happened for you is because you wanted to go lower in your squat. And so you didn't have enough of the flexion and internal rotation to get lower. And so in order for you to get lower in your squat, you decided that you didn't consciously decide this, but you wanted to go lower. And so your body wasn't able to do that because you didn't have the hip mobility for it. And so that mobility then got transferred and you had your lumbar spine compensated and really flexed under to allow you to go lower in the squat.
Which is bonkers because I'm not thinking, oh, I'll just posteriorly.
Right. This all just happens automatically unless you are aware of it.
Yeah. But the body's phenomenal. I wanted to do this motion and my body figured out, oh, we'll do this to allow you to go into that position.
Exactly.
It wasn't what was supposed to happen.
Exactly. And so that's the what when it came to what exactly happened with Kevin and why this caused a pain with him. Now, getting back to, and maybe we'll get to this a little bit later in the episode of like, when is it okay to run? Because I'm sure that's one of the top questions that every single runner has.
That was my question.
And we are going to talk about that for sure. But before we talk about treatment and getting back into running, it's important for us to also understand the neuroscience of pain. And this is one of the comments that has come back to bite me because it was received in a way that it was not intended. So Kevin says that I'll let you tell the story of what I said when when you told me about your pain. Because I wish we had a video camera. Actually, we do. I think it happened out here. We should check the Zoom cam. Actually, I don't think I have that much history in our recording, but You said that I just told you, oh, this is all in your head. And clearly that's not exactly what I said, but that was the way that you perceived it.
No, this is exactly what happened. So I was sitting at my computer trying to get work, complaining that my back was hurting because I couldn't sit for very long because sitting was remarkably uncomfortable. But so was laying down and standing. The problem was as I couldn't maintain any position for an extended period of time. And so I was sitting and then moved to standing and probably said some sort of complaint about my back, about how uncomfortable it was and painful it was, hoping that you would fix it instead of just saying, hey, please come help me fix it. And then you looked at me and you said, pain is all in your head. Deal with it. Is actually, I think you may have cursed. There may have been profanity involved. And
I
then she
mean, come on.
might have kicked me. It's possible. It's possible that she just walked over and pushed me out of the chair and then pointed at me on the ground. No, none of that happened. But you are entirely correct that a good aspect of pain is in your head.
Mhm.
And amusingly enough, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before this happened to me, I had listened to an entire podcast on the psychology of pain. And one of the things that happened in it is one of the hosts was talking about they had done a deadlift and hurt their back. And they went and they saw a doctor to make sure that they didn't like need a disc or anything.
Mhm.
And they hadn't. And they went back to the gym the next day. They did it with a ridiculously reduced weight relative to what they're used to, but they did it because of exactly what we're going to want to talk about is they didn't want to tell their body you're more hurt than you are. And yeah, part of that is in your head because your body wants to freak out and be like, no, you're in an extreme amount of pain. And there is actually something wrong in my lower back. But what level of pain that is that a 1, is that a 9, is interpreted in my head. So pain is technically all in your head, but it is also wherever that pain is actually coming from.
So, yes, the interpretation and pain perception is in your head. And there's literally people out there that don't have pain. There are people out there that do not experience pain. There is a medical condition where people don't experience pain. And it's actually a very dangerous condition because they could literally put their hand on a hot stove and not know that their skin is burning off because they can't feel the pain.
Yeah,
So
the sensation is the smell of their burning skin.
yeah.
And by then it's probably too late.
Oh God, that sounds terrible. So yes, there is a neuroscience behind this. And I think that I can't remember exactly what I told Kevin, but I did say something about how part of the pain is in your head. And that's the part that we have to get over because it's very important for us to understand that pain is not objective. Pain is very subjective. And it's so funny to me how many people have said to me throughout the years, oh, I have a high pain tolerance, as if that's a thing. You just have a different perception of pain and you have a different way that you're able to push through pain versus maybe other people. And so it's important for us to understand that the pain that you're experiencing is the way that your brain is perceiving it. It is not just a signal of tissue damage. Just because you're having pain doesn't mean that there is excessive amounts of tissue damage. It's your brain's best guess about whether a threat exists. So it's a protective mechanism in the brain. There is likely and usually some sort of tissue damage that starts the pain cycle, right? Because there are different pain fibers that transfer a signal from the damaged tissue to the brain. And that is a real thing, right? There's something going on in the body that tells the brain something's wrong here. There's a threat here. And so your brain, your nervous system perceives that as pain. It also perceives it as dangerous, which is important because if there is actual tissue damage, then you need to stop doing certain activities because you don't want to make that damage worse. However, a lot of people can end up in this pain cycle where the experience of pain is actually much worse than what the tissue damage is because of the meanings that they have around it or because of the fear that they have around the pain. And also the pain sensation can last longer than the tissue damage itself. And there's actually, again, medical conditions where pain is actually experienced long after the tissues have actually healed. So pain itself is a science, like neuroscience phenomenon. All right. And so the second thing we need to understand is that pain can also be present without significant tissue damage because the nervous system has become sensitized to it. So Kevin's pain was real. It was limiting. It wasn't like, I think that when we say, oh, it's all in your head, it just, a lot of people take that as like meaning, oh, you're just making this up. It's not real. It's fake. No, it's definitely real. It was definitely limiting him in literally every single activity that he was going through that first week. But part of what was keeping the pain at that level was his nervous system was just so guarded. His nervous system was in high alert mode. And so he was guarding the area and restricting so many of his movements as a protective strategy because in all of that, most of it was happening unconsciously. Maybe there might have been a piece of it that's conscious, but most of that happens at an unconscious level. And so when we went into actually trying to get to the core of Kevin's pain and the things that we're going to be talking about today with what we actually did, part of my strategy was to help actually improve the area of damage and work on mobility and the strength and those kinds of things, but also on the nervous system sense of safety, to let the nervous system and the muscles know it's okay. You can relax. You don't have to tense up and guard. It was about restoring that gentle movement so that the body felt safe.
Yeah, which is really tricky because you can't just, I mean, if someone is freaking out over whatever the situation is, like emotionally freaking out, they're very upset about something, walking over to them and telling them to calm down is never a helpful process.
Right.
Like telling the various muscles around my hip, oh, just calm down. Oh, if I just sit here and I breathe for a second, I'll be able to relax that muscle. I couldn't. They were so tight, and trying to actively relax them was not fixing anything. It was having literally the same result of having somebody coming out of a burning building being like, just take a breath and calm yourself. It's not going to work.
Yeah. And that really highlights the last thing that we want to kind of talk about before we get into what we did, which is this fear avoidance trap that so many people fall into. So back pain is one of those things that so many people are scared of, right? Because your back, you can't get away from back pain. It's pretty much involved in all of your activities of daily living, regardless of what
you think it is.
Way more than you think it is. Yeah. And regardless of what position you're in too. And I think that's really the scary part for a lot of people. And so what I often see happening is that runners and people in general, but specifically runners, tend to go in one of two main directions. The first one is that they just push through the pain and they're like, screw that. I'm not letting this limit. I'm just going to push through it, whether it's back pain or some other type of pain. Or they just try to avoid it completely. And they say, okay, I need to rest and I have to make sure that this goes away because I don't want this to affect my running long term. But neither of those things are the most effective thing to do because oftentimes, like if you push through it, that's just going to aggravate not only the tissue damage potentially, but also the nervous system because the nervous system is already sensitized. And so the pain can be prolonged. But if you stop moving entirely, then that can increase stiffness and weakness in the surrounding musculature, which is also not helpful. And it also confirms to your nervous system that the area is dangerous. You're reinforcing that point of, like, you're right, something's seriously wrong here. And so neither of these things work. And so this is why the old method of back pain recovery several decades ago, I don't want to say 20 years ago because I've been doing this for 20 years now, but 50 years ago, when someone got hurt, the prescription was always rest, right? You're on bed rest. Bed rest was the thing that they prescribed to everybody. We now know that is a terrible prescription, especially for back pain, that we need to gently reintroduce movement. And this is pretty much goes for most types of pain, unless we're talking about a bone injury. We want to reintroduce movement safely, slowly, effectively, gentle, in a very controlled manner. We don't want to be a complete rest and we don't want to just force everything and push through it. We want to be somewhere in the middle to allow the tissues. We don't want to increase tissue damage. We want to make sure that those tissues are healing and also helping to recalibrate the nervous system in the process to know that it's okay to not be so tense because the nervous system is just tensing the muscles up to try to protect the area. That's its job. And so we have to let the nervous system know it's okay to relax and let go. And that's a big piece of the framework that we used with Kevin.
But This is why it's super helpful to work with you because you knew how to progress things. This is why what I was doing was not working because I knew that bridging was not going to be a bad idea. It was better than absolute rest. I was trying to make sure that I was still having some movement.
Yeah, but bridging for you was one of the most painful things that you could do at the beginning when you first started it.
Yeah, I couldn't actually just lay on the ground and pelvically tilt without a
Yeah.
whole lot of pain and then trying to take it and do a bridge. I could do an inappropriate bridge. I could curve my back too much and then
Inappropriate
lift my hips
bridge.
off. Like if I really rotated my pelvis while laying on the ground, then I could bridge without pain.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do a proper bridge.
Yeah, because you were shortening your hip flexors, and so that was helping to take the pressure off of your spine.
Yeah,
Do you
I
see
didn't know
now why
it
that
worked,
works?
but I knew that it did.
Yeah. But do you see now, based on what we talked about already, like why that worked?
Yeah, of course. But before I started actually getting help from you, I was like, oh, I'll do some bridges. Oh, doing bridges that way doesn't feel good. I'll do bridges this way. But
Yeah.
doing bridges in a way that I was avoiding the pain was essentially not doing bridges.
You weren't activating the right muscles that you needed anyway. All right, so let's talk about what we actually did. All right, so now that everyone has a good background of kind of what was going on with Kevin and his back, I do have to add my little medical disclaimer here is that everything that we're going to be talking about today is not a prescription. I'm not your doctor. I'm not your physical therapist. I'm not telling you what to do here. I'm simply telling you what worked for Kevin and the things that we focused on for Kevin and his specific back pain presentation. They are good principles. If you use them, you do so at your own discretion. I highly suggest that if you have back pain, you possibly consider getting it cleared by a medical professional to make sure that there's not something more serious going on, especially if there's any sort of loss of bladder control, loss of bowel control, if there's radiation of pain, if there's numbness, if there's significant trauma involved. We need to go make sure that there's nothing really bad going on here. Okay, so let's get that disclaimer out of the way first.
Excellent disclaimer. But if none of those apply to you, if you're working kind of the way I am, is you could point to the activity that you were doing that brought about the pain, that you can go to positions that change the pain, increase or decrease the pain. Certain movements make it feel better than others. Then this is probably going to be a good approach for you.
Yeah. All right. So the first
I'm
thing
not a doctor at all, so I'm just going for it.
I'm just going for it. All right. So the first thing that we focused on is mobility, and specifically mobility above the area of pain and below the area of pain. So the important principle that you need to understand is that when a joint is restricted or painful, the body compensates by essentially stealing mobility from the joints above and below that. If this area doesn't move properly, I've got to get that movement from somewhere. And so that's what was happening with Kevin. And so if the lumbar spine and the SI joint are affected, then oftentimes it will go to the thoracic spine or the hips or vice versa. If the hips and the thoracic spine are limited, more force goes through the lumbar spine and SI joint. And that's one of the reasons also why those areas tend to get more injuries and more pain. It's because of restrictions in the hip and the thoracic spine. So you can't just fix.
That was my issue that caused the pain.
Exactly. And so you can't fix the lower back in isolation. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see most people making is that if I have pain in my right knee, I'm going to do right knee exercises to fix it. But you have to address the full chain. So with Kevin's lower back, we had to address above the area of pain and below. So the upper spine, the thoracic spine, and then and also his hips. Majorly, we had to address what was going on in his hips. So if it's the knee, same thing. Above it, you have to address the hip, and below it, you have to address the foot and the ankle. So your whole body, it's like that wonderful song that we all learned when we were kids. Everything is connected. The thigh bone's connected to the hip knee bone, right? I forget the order.
But it's actually not really because your patella is just free floating, but that's what the song said.
Thank you. Perfect. It depends on what you just define as your knee bone. It could be the femur or the tibia too, because
I know
technically it's a joint and not a bone.
The knee bone
Yeah.
is part of the song was suggested that maybe it wasn't actually solid anatomy lesson.
Yeah. So for Kevin, we're addressing mobility first. Okay. Mobility is your body's available to move. It is decreasing restrictions of movement, whether that comes from tissue restrictions or just restrictions in your movement patterns. Because one of the things that we were talking about with our members today, like inside of our membership in the workshop, we were talking about movement patterns and how movement patterns just oftentimes get reinforced in the body. You start moving a certain way. Maybe you've been moving that way since you were a kid, since you were a teenager. Maybe you had an injury 20 years ago that changed the way that your body moved, and you've just been moving that way ever since. At some point, that's going to catch up to you because the joints that movement is supposed to be occurring in aren't doing their job. Other joints are picking up the slack, and so those joints are getting overworked, and those areas of the body are getting overworked. So the thoracic spine, in Kevin's specific situation here, and this is something that's very common for anyone that has low back pain, oftentimes there's restrictions in the thoracic spine. So your spine is separated into three main areas. There's your cervical spine, which is your neck, your thoracic spine, which is your torso, and then your lumbar spine, which is the lower back. And each of those areas of the spine have different jobs. And the thoracic spine is designed for rotation. And when it loses that rotational capacity, like if you have restrictions in rotation, then your body compensates by asking your lumbar spine to rotate instead. But the lumbar spine is not designed to rotate. It is designed more for flexion and extension, which is bending forward and bending backwards. The thoracic spine also does that, but not as much, right? And so again, each area of the spine works together and has its own job. And when one person's not doing its job, the other pieces have to come in and pick up the slack. So if
they're not designed to do it. So they're picking up slack that they're not really great at doing.
Yeah.
They can sort of do it, but they really shouldn't be. And so you're literally fitting a square peg in a round hole and being like, yeah, but that's my plan. That's my plan for life. That's the movement I'm going to do forever.
Yeah.
And if you put enough stress on a movement where the wrong muscles, the wrong joints are doing you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. And if it's just like at work, like one of the things I think about is if you work in an office and there are certain people that are supposed to do the mail, and there's certain people that are supposed to talk to clients, and there's other people that everybody has different roles in an office. And you all, if you work in an office or in any sort of company, you know that there are those people that don't pull their weight. And when those people don't pull their weight, the work still has to get done. So oftentimes it falls on you or it falls on somebody else. And if that weight falls on you, then you don't have the full capacity to do your job as well. And then the rest of the stuff that you're supposed to be doing suffers. Or you get it done and then you go home and you're completely burnt out and exhausted and you snap at your family. It's going to play out somewhere in the chain, right? And so the same thing is happening in the body. And so when the lumbar spine is being asked to rotate, which it's not designed to do, it's going to put more wear and tear on that spine. It's going to it's going to weaken that area because it's just not designed for that. And so when anybody has lower back pain, one of the first things I look at is trying to restore mobility in the thoracic spine, specifically rotation and extension, to help take some of that pressure off the lower back, because the lower back's been being asked to do a job that it's not well suited for. And so if we can try to give some of that stress and give some of that job back to the people that are supposed to be doing it, which is the thoracic spine, that just starts to remove some of that stress and that strain from the lumbar spine, which will allow the tissues to heal.
Okay, so what did we actually do for me that helped my thoracic spine rotate? Because to me, I'm like, well, why didn't you just have me sit in a chair and kind of like turn from side to side? But like we had like specific things.
Yeah.
And I feel like lay on the ground with my feet, with my knees bent, let my knees drop to the left and the right is one of the like easiest things that we did.
That was one of the first things that we did to try to get some of that rotation back. And we did that, and I had you with your arms out to the side as well, so that we were allowing more of that rotation to happen through your thoracic spine. And then we were also adding breathing into it and head rotation. So when you drop your legs to one side and you rotate your head to the opposite side, you're rotating not only your neck, but the upper thoracic area away from it. So you're trying to get more of that rotation through the upper spine.
If you rotate your neck, then you're rotating what's that, cervical spine. Does that then tell your thoracic spine, hey, we're doing a rotating thing?
It doesn't tell it, but like the cervical spine connected to the thoracic spine. So you're probably
encourages.
Yeah, you're kicking in like the upper thoracic spine, right? And so everything is connected. We're trying to get everybody on board here. And then I was also very directive, I guess is a good word, about how to breathe through these movements, because breathing is going to not only help your nervous system, it's going to help your tissues relax into some of these movements as well to help reduce some of that muscle guarding that was going on with you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that was super annoying.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
I think it
know,
was.
because runners don't like to do things slowly.
I know. I think it was probably remarkably helpful. And
Yeah.
trust me, that week I was doing things on my own. I was probably holding my breath for most of it.
Mm.
But
A
he
lot,
gave me,
I have to interrupt because a lot of runners do, like a lot of people, they do hold their breath because there's pain, right? And so one of the first inclinations, one of the first things that we do is hold our breath to try to brace the area, but that's not helpful.
yeah, you brace because therefore you're gonna hold everything.
Yeah.
And you gave me very specific breathing patterns to do things. And like breathe in as your legs move this way and breathe out as you go this way.
Yeah.
Um, it made the mobility routine take so long,
Yeah.
which was extra frustrating to me. And I share this, hopefully that it connects to some people who are listening also. But then it made the mobility routine take so long. And since I try to avoid mobility routines in general,
Which is
now
what
having
led you
this,
to this problem.
I know, but now I've got this 30 to 45-minute mobility routine that I'm supposed to calmly breathe my way through. And for the first few days, I was super annoyed about it. And then I just accept it. That's just what it is. And it's getting me better.
I was about to say, and then you started running and realized, oh, wait a second.
I know it was improving things, but
Yeah.
it did not make it just, it wasn't an easy thing for me to do to slow down and calmly breathe through the mobility.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like you're doing as much as going out for a run. I know what I'm doing when I go out for a run. Like you can check your watch and be like, this is the amount of miles that I've knocked off. Laying on our garage, moving my legs in various positions as I calmly breathe, did not feel like I was doing as much.
It didn't feel
In fact,
productive.
I was in fact doing way more.
Yeah. And that's going back to, again, the mindset of redefining productivity, redefining what is productive. Because by you taking the time to do these mobility things, you were able to actually get out on the road a lot faster and resume getting back to running the way that you wanted to run a lot sooner than you would have if you would have just kept pushing through it and just getting it done versus actually focusing on it.
Yeah. All right. So that's thoracic spine rotation. What else?
Yeah. And then thoracic extension. So the foam roller we did of getting you to extend over the foam roller. Remember when I had you put the foam roller around your shoulder blades?
Yeah. So was ridiculously hard because I could, with a lot of pain, get into the position the foam roller was under my shoulder blades, but I couldn't. Trying to relax and breathe in that position, because to get there was so uncomfortable for my hips and lower back and everything. And then I couldn't roll at all as I was on it. So I just had to be in this remarkably uncomfortable position. It didn't feel like it was doing anything to my thoracic spine because my whole body was tense just to get into it. I can do it now.
Yeah.
It took me a few days.
Oh, yeah. And you were so annoyed with me about that one. You're like, what is this even doing? I don't even feel this. I can't even relax. What am I supposed to do here?
Yeah, no, I think what may have been better feedback to my physical therapist at the time is I don't feel as though I can relax into this position. So I don't think the foam roller is going to be as effective. Maybe we could try it again tomorrow. I think may have been better feedback. But much like when you walked over and told me it was all in my head and pushed me down
and kicked you in the shin,
I just yelled at you. I think it's probably how I handled that.
You didn't yell at me. It's just the tone of voice. Kevin never yells. That's not who Kevin is. So don't let him fool you. He's not a yeller. It's just the tone of voice, the annoyance in the voice with certain things and the shortness of your tone.
Yes, what I should have said is, dear love, I am so tight right now and so tense. Can we maybe try the foam roller again tomorrow? That's what I should have said.
All right, so we focus on the area above the spine and then, or above the lower back, the SI joint. And then we also focus on the area below the joint, which is his hip. So his hip specifically in internal rotation and external rotation. He also had some flexion issues, which we're going to be talking about too. So quick anatomy reminder, the hip is a ball and socket joint, and it's designed for movement in all directions. And so in a lot of runners, and this is what was going on with Kevin, hip internal rotation, which is the, let's see, I'm doing this on camera. So there's a visual here, but those of you that are like listening on the podcast, it's toes in. That's what it is. Okay. So you've got a ball and socket joint. It's if you were to rotate your leg so that your toes in, like you were being pigeon toed, that's internal rotation. And then external rotation is rotating the feet out to the side like a duck, like walking like a duck. Is that a good description, Kev?
Yep.
Okay. And so in most runners, internal rotation is limited. And that's what was going on with Kevin. And this matters because of coupling patterns. And so coupling patterns are a thing that happens in the hip and in the spine. And this is one of the fundamental things we need to understand with how these injuries happen. So, hip flexion, which is bending the knee, like lifting the leg off the ground and bending the knee up towards the ceiling, that is coupled with internal rotation. So, if internal rotation is limited, it can also limit hip flexion, which is why with Kevin, when he got into that bottom of his squat, he didn't have the internal rotation that he needed. So he didn't have the hip flexion that he needed. So that flexion needed to move into the lumbar spine. And that's why the spine was taking up some of that flexion movement because he didn't have that mobility available at the hip. Make sense?
Yeah, everything being connected is super annoying.
So as you run and you walk and you squat, your hip should naturally internally rotate during the loading phase, which is when all of your weight is on that leg. Okay, so when you're running and you've got all of your weight on one leg, that's called the loading phase, and the other leg that's swinging through, that's called swing phase. Okay, so when you're in the loading phase, your hip is naturally rotating inward, and then it naturally rotates more outward during the push-off phase. Okay. So if internal rotation is restricted, then the body compensates. So that could be either twisting through the pelvis and the lumbar spine or by changing the entire movement pattern.
That kind of makes sense because I tend to, if I don't pay attention or I start getting really tired, I land with my toes pointing out.
Yeah. And so we really focused a lot on Kevin's internal rotation work. So one of the big things that we did was hip 90-90s. And Kevin, you can tell them a little bit about kind of where you were when we started and then where you were yesterday, because you've made significant improvement in that.
That part of that is the internal rotation, and part of that is just that all the other muscles have started to relax.
Yes, for sure.
When we first started, okay, so we head out to our garage and Angie just lay down on the floor. Now, her saying lay down on the floor on day one was like a 30-second process. It took a while carefully holding on to things just to lay down on the floor. So then she was like, okay, now sit with your feet in front of you. My hamstrings are super, super tight. Before injury, after injury, my hamstrings are super, super tight. So to sit on the floor with my feet out in front of me means I have to put my hands back behind me because I'm making a 120-degree angle. I lean back pretty far. I can't just sit up against a wall with my legs out in front of me. So now bend your knees up in front of you and just sit there. I'm almost, as I'm trying to do this, to sit upright with my legs out in front of me and to then bend my knees, I almost fell backwards. I was about to start doing old school sit-ups where my knees are bent in front of me and I'm laying on the ground. And then you wanted me to let my legs move side to side. I couldn't move my knees from both of my knees laying towards the left to both my knees leaning towards the right unless I was almost completely laid backwards. I was nowhere near sitting upright. And to get anywhere close to upright, I was pushing with both hands so hard off the ground to try to just not fall backwards. And now, what are we, 2 weeks in? Just over 2 weeks in? Now I can actually, my restriction is hamstrings, but if I can get into the position where my knees are going over to the right side, I can, without having to put my hands on the ground, I can flip them now so that both legs go over to the right side. And then I can lean forward onto my knee and breathe appropriately as I do it, and almost fall forward onto my knee forward, which is apparently I thought was a hamstring issue, but apparently it was absurd tightness through my hips.
Yeah. And so we really worked on that. That was one of the big things that we really worked on, was helping Kevin to start to restore some of that mobility. He's nowhere near where he needs to be yet, but hopefully he's going to continue working on his mobility, and that's going to help him moving forward.
What's super key here is you've told me for a while that I should do 90-90s, that it will help with my hip mobility.
Yeah.
I don't think I was doing them correctly because I was just leaning back. Like
Okay.
when I would go from on the left side to on the right side, I would just lean really far back to allow my knees to swing through because it compensated for the tightness through my hips. I couldn't make that motion happen. So I would just lean backwards so that my knees could pass on the way through. So it's so much of this along the way. Like every exercise you gave me was like, okay, I get what the exercise is supposed to look like. Now also, where am I supposed to be feeling it? Because I could trick my body into doing the motion by doing other things. That's what I've been doing all along. I don't know when I started squatting incorrectly. It's possible that I've literally never done a correct squat in my life. It's possible that I screwed this up when I started trying to increase weight, and I overcompensated by trying to get deeper with higher weight on the bar. It's possible that I just used to take shallow squats and now I take deeper squats, and that's when I fixed it. It's possible that having a hernia a few years ago caused the issues. I don't know, but I don't squat correctly. And so now trying to squat correctly is a very difficult process because it takes so much mental focus to just do the movement.
All right. And then the third thing that we did for Kevin's mobility was trying to work on releasing the iliopsoas. So we talked already about how the psoas attaches to the lumbar spine, and when it's tight, it's pulling on the lower back. And so we had to be really careful here, but I taught Kevin how to do a self-release on the iliopsoas muscle because every time I tried to do a manual release on him, he started laughing because Kevin is one of the most ticklish humans you'll probably ever meet. And so I tried to release it and he just couldn't he couldn't tolerate it.
I tried breathing. It didn't
do anything.
I really tried breathing. I tried very calm, focused breathing.
Yeah.
And I was laughing so much.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I couldn't even do it for myself because I had to calm my nervous system down a little bit before I could even try it on myself.
You're a little tense. You're a little tense. So I taught him a technique using a softball where he had to lay on the softball. But you have to be very careful. And I'm not going to go into detail about this specific technique because it can be dangerous if you don't get it right, because there's a lot of stuff in the lower abdomen that can be a problem. So basically, we did some soft tissue release on the iliopsoas as well. And so if that's something that you think you might need, I would highly recommend seeing a practitioner, a physical therapist that's skilled in that area, or if you wanted to look up your own videos on YouTube or something like that. I don't want to really talk too much about that because there's a bunch of nerves and blood flow issues and stuff that can happen in there if you don't get it right.
Yeah, 100%. Look up a YouTube video, but it's not Angie's.
Yeah, it's not going to be mine.
That is the answer to the question.
Yeah. All right.
The problem is it's painful. Doing it correct is going to be uncomfortable, and doing it wrong is going to be uncomfortable. Yeah. And so it's going to be tough to tell that you're doing it wrong. So that is probably one where you actually need a PT.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely best under supervision. And if you are in our membership, I will be posting a video of specifically what we did with Kevin. But again, it's always at your own, use at your own discretion. So the thing
based off that video also, that is a members only because it's more of like a OnlyFans kind of video. So maybe keep that in our members only there.
I am going to laugh so hard if we get 20 new members this week because you just said that. So the key that we need to remember is that the goal when we do soft tissue release, a lot of people think that they're like breaking up tissue and they're improving the length of the muscle. That's not what we're going for. What we're actually going for is what's called neuromuscular inhibition. It's helping the psoas and those tight overactive muscles let go and learn how to relax so that the pelvis can find a more neutral position before your different movement begins, because the muscles just get tight and they get overactive and they don't know how to relax. And so part of the soft tissue release that we do is really restricting blood flow to those muscles to help the muscles actually just relax.
Yeah, I was doing soft tissue release in the week I was treating myself. I was just on the complete other side. I was rolling a lacrosse ball around on my butt.
Which is not bad either. And that's definitely a technique that I use with a lot of people. And for you too, that can also be helpful. And doing soft tissue work in the back because your glutes were also very tight. So that's also a helpful thing.
Everything was so tight at that point in time.
Because your body is typically more tense. You have overreactive muscles, I would say. Your body's natural inclination is to tighten up to protect the area. And that's how
So
a lot
is
of
my
people,
mind's natural inclination.
but that's how a lot of people are wired. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just important to know that. All right. All right. So that was part one. That was mobility. I don't even know, since we're like recording on Zoom, how long this episode is. So we're going to just apologize in advance if this kind of goes longer, but I think that it's still helpful. So I guess you guys could always put us on 1.2 speed if you want to.
There you go.
Okay. The second thing that we focused on with Kevin was motor reprogramming. So mobility is really only half of the equation. Mobility is restoring that normal, natural, gentle, available, usable range of motion. But if your nervous system doesn't know how to use that range of motion, doesn't know how to control movement in that new range, it's going to revert back to the compensation pattern that it already knows. And so what we have to do is what's called motor reprogramming or motor control to teach the body and teach the brain new movement habits. Because a lot of times we've developed these dysfunctional movement patterns through lots of different reasons. Like Kevin said, Kevin asked me this question and I don't really know the answer to it, which is, have I always squatted this way? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there might be, you might have had a dysfunctional squat pattern since you were a teenager or since you were in your 20s or who knows, and maybe the hernia made it worse, or maybe you were good before and then the hernia caused this problem. Who knows what causes these things? Different dysfunctional movement patterns can happen because you're sitting a lot. When you're very sedentary, your hip flexors get tight. So then if you lose mobility and you lose range of motion in the hips, again, other things always pop in to compensate. So
I think it makes sense also that this happened over the summer. I sit more often over the summer. As a teacher, I'm up and walking all day long.
Yeah.
I sit more over the summer. But
Interesting.
The thing that I want to talk about on this motor reprogramming is our body defaults to what it used to do. This is when the last time we moved, and we moved a long time ago, but I remember driving home from work, I turned the wrong direction because I was going to our old house. Like, it was like, you don't live there anymore, but it's what your brain has done. And things like driving home, you do on autopilot.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying attention enough that you're following the rules of the road, you're not hitting other cars, but you're doing a lot of it on autopilot. Most of your body's motions happen on autopilot. When we opened the episode, you're talking about that your body is responsible for so many movements, not until you really think about it, or that you've hurt your back and you're like, oh God, my body's involved in everything, because you do so many of these things without thinking about it. And that's why you have to do this careful, actual, appropriate motor reprogramming, which is so hard because it's teaching your body to do something in a way that it has not done possibly ever.
Yeah. And the other important thing to point out here too is the difference between how you're actually moving and how you think you're moving. And this is a big piece that Kevin learned yesterday when we started filming him doing his squat. And I started to show him, because he watched the video and was like, that's not what it feels like I'm doing. It feels like I'm doing it the right way. And that's because his brain, he's been doing it for so long this way that his brain has encoded his current move or his previous movement pattern as normal. That's just the normal way. Of course, I'm doing a squat the right way. I've been squatting since I was 14 years old. I've been doing this forever. You're an experienced runner, like all of these things. But just because you feel like it's the normal thing doesn't mean that there aren't dysfunctional movement patterns happening under the surface.
Yeah, literally the first time, yesterday we were doing a bunch of filming, which was super helpful. But when I first got out and you were like, all right, let's watch you do a squat, an unweighted squat.
Yeah.
And I first went down and you moved your knees. Hey, what do you mean I moved my knees? You're like, your first thing you did is to bend your knees. I want the first thing you do is to put your butt out behind you. And so then I tried to squat and I just froze in place. I'm like, how do I squat that my butt moves first? So then I had to close my eyes and focus so much to try to get the right part of my body moving correctly.
Yeah.
And as soon as I wasn't thinking about it and I tried to squat, knee shot forward again. It takes so much thought to do the thing. It's exhausting. I'm still doing air squats. I can definitely lift more than that.
Yeah.
but I don't know if I can lift more than that while I'm concentrating so much that joints are moving in the correct direction.
Yeah. And so it's important for us to understand that there's nothing wrong with Kevin. It's just the way that this movement pattern has been stored in his nervous system, because your brain, your nervous system always wants to put as much as possible on autopilot, like Kevin said, because the less you have to think, the less decisions you have to make in your life. That's why it feels so exhausting for him to learn this new movement pattern, because he is trying to go against his stored motor programs. He's going against the body's autopilot setting that it's just been doing for who knows how long, possibly for decades. And so it becomes very labor intensive and attention intensive when you're trying to do these things, because you're essentially trying to break a habit that has been there for who knows how long. And that habit has become encoded as the default. So you are now trying to essentially install a new program, which takes a lot of memory. It takes time. It takes space, just like it would in a computer. And so and this is what the other reason why a little bit of cueing isn't just going to automatically fix the problem. Like me saying, oh, stick your hips back instead of putting your knees forward. And then Kevin says, oh, really? That's all I have to do? It doesn't work that quickly, right? Because there's a whole new motor program that he has to build and then encode. And then he has to do that enough so that the body now realizes that's the new default program versus the old way.
And it's a movement that you're not used to. So once I finally realized, oh, put my hips back behind me, then I overcompensated and I tilted my back.
Tilted the pelvis. Exactly. So that when I said stick out your butt, your first reaction was to arch your lower back to stick out your butt, which is not what I wanted.
Yeah. And I'm still working on my default to stick out my butt to actually move the right things.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult. And I've been working on that for a week, and I still struggle to make it move correctly.
But are you getting better?
I'm getting better, but that's also why videotaping or having you watch me, because it feels like I'm doing it. And I've been working on this for a week. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing it better. But if I film myself, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm still doing it not right. Better, but not correctly. So it's frustrating. It's humbling is what it is.
It's humbling. Yeah. So I 100% agree with what Kevin just said. If you aren't working with a professional that understands movement, film yourself and start with that. Start with filming yourself and then watching that video back and seeing, what does your movement actually look like? Start looking for these things. Do I have an excess amount of curvature in my lower back? Is my pelvis tilting forward? Is it tucking under? These are some of the things that you can start looking at. And then from there, when you start to bring that awareness, one of the first things I had Kevin do as far as movement reprogramming was learning how to find a neutral spine, which
I didn't know what that was. I did not know what that was. So just go to a neutral spine. I'm like, yeah, okay.
And I'm so glad that you said that, because most people don't know what that is. Most people don't. Not only do they not know it, they've probably never experienced it, because most people tend to live their lives either in an anterior pelvic tilt, which is that tilt forward. And this is especially true for women and girls, because like a lot of women, they tilt their hips forward so they get their butts to stick back out. And they also stick their chest out because when they're teenagers, they want to look good in a bikini or whatever it is, right? And so they're doing all these weird like spine positioning, and they don't actually know what it feels like to go neutral. Some people are more of a posterior pelvic tilt, where they flatten that back out and kind of tuck the tush under. And so a lot of people don't understand what a neutral pelvis even is. And so this is one of the first things that I help Kevin find. So for you guys that are listening, to find neutral spine, what I'll have people do is do an excessive pelvic tilt forward and then an excessive pelvic tilt backward, and then try to find somewhere in the middle. So Kevin, what was that like for you to figure out?
It was awful. It was so frustrating.
Yeah. And the other thing that I also will say too is the progression of it is important also. So I started with Kevin doing this on the ground, like lying on his back with his knees bent, and then trying to figure that out, because then he at least has the feedback of the ground. You feel your back, if your back is flattening against the ground or not. Then we moved to sitting, then we moved to standing, so that he could start to find neutral spine in different positions.
Yeah, that's why just laying on my back in pelvic tilts are helpful, because I'm like, okay, these are the muscles that I need to use.
Yeah.
But to stand up and then go to neutral spine feels like I'm excessively posteriorly rotated. It
Yeah,
feels like I'm gonna fall over backwards.
because you're used to being more anterior rotated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nothing about it feels neutral. It feels like I'm squeezing my glutes continuously the entire time, and that it's going to be difficult to breathe.
Yeah.
Like, everything about it feels so remarkably uncomfortable. And I got to it, and because you had me go excessively anterior, then excessively posterior, and then try and find neutral, and you're like, yeah, that's neutral. And I'm like, none of this is comfortable. It felt like I was straining to be in that position. And I assume at some point I'll be able to be in that position and not feel uncomfortable. I could actually be a normal resting position.
Yeah, that's the goal for sure. The other things that we did are to really help improve the hip internal rotation in functional positions. So, not just internal rotation mobility, which was important for us to start with, but also learning how to control the internal and external rotation of the hip when he was in a standing position. So, that's when I had you starting to do the airplane movements, Kevin, where you were standing on one leg and opening the hip to the side, opening up the hip and then coming back down. And one of Kevin's compensation patterns, because he didn't have that strength and control at the hip, was he was, again, twisting more through the spine.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I thought I was doing it correctly until you watched.
And also until you saw yourself. Again, that's where the video really helped. Because I think that when it's not just me watching and cueing, which can be helpful, but it's also when you're able to see yourself, you're like, oh, wow, that doesn't look right. Because part of your brain's probably, yeah, does Angie really know what she's talking about? I'm doing this right. It feels fine in the spine. But then when you see it yourself,
none of it feels fine.
But when you see it yourself, you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. And then you were like, oh, I need that muscle to pull, not to push. And I'm like, yes, exactly. And then you were able to do it a lot better.
Yeah. So the benefit of having you, and this is a benefit for people who are in our team also, is when you have exercises, you video yourself. So you could watch you do it repeatedly.
Yeah.
But then you need a video of yourself so that you can compare the two of them. Because I can watch you do it and then I can do it myself and be like, all right, I knew when I first started that it was not at all what you were doing. But I couldn't even figure out how to make my body move the way that yours was moving. And I'm like, am I not, is it a limit in mobility, or am I just not using the right muscles? And none of things were moving correctly. And having the video of myself really brought awareness of which parts weren't moving. But yeah, I'm always going to try and overcompensate and figure out how can I get close to that thing. And that was the problem, is I'm trying to, I don't know, impress you that I can get the movement correct. But I wasn't getting the movement correct. I was faking correct movement, and that's not helpful at all.
Yeah, and also rushing through it too. And this is not just you, but this is a lot of my patients. Another patient I was working with this morning was doing the same thing. I'm like, slow down, slow down. He was just trying to move through and get the exercise done, but he wasn't getting good contractions when he was doing that.
That's where you telling me to breathe is all the exercises, and this is part of my issue that I have with yoga, and I will make this a very short rant, but if I breathe slowly, I breathe really slowly. So if a yoga teacher starts with cueing of take a deep breath and now exhale, but I haven't finished my deep breath. If that's the cue, take a deep breath and now exhale. And now take another deep breath. I'm like, you are hyperventilating over there. That pacing is off for me.
Yeah.
And so now when you're like, no, to breathe slowly as you do the exercises, it's going to take me a couple of minutes to do 10 exercises.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting.
And that's okay, because that's what you need right now.
But that's the key, is having you be able to say, and that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah. And then the final thing is that I'll mention with the movement reprogramming is fixing his squat, right? And really understanding what his spine was doing in the squat, which we've already talked about, but then also what he needed to do to fix that. And part of that means finding that neutral spine, squatting down to the point where he could maintain that neutral spine. And as soon as that pelvis started to tuck under, he came back up, like squatting down as far as you can with the neutral spine and then coming right back up. Because if you are going down into that movement pattern where that pelvis tucks under, you're just reinforcing the dysfunctional movement pattern, right? So it's learning how to control that movement while maintaining good alignment, only doing what you're currently able to do and then coming back out of it. And then you start to build strength, you start to build range in that movement, and then your body is going to be able to relax and be able to maintain that movement into greater depths.
Yes. So at the start of 2026, we said this is the year I'm going to get jacked. And instead I hurt my back. But now I'm working on being able to squat correctly, which is probably going to help a whole bunch of other movements.
And you're also going to be able to squat more.
Yeah.
Because the way that you were doing it at this point, the way that you were showing me, like there was going to be for sure a limit. And we found one.
We found the limit on that one.
We found one.
Which is weird because I have squatted definitely more, like substantially more than what I was squatting when I hurt my back. I was doing all of this under a lot of fatigue.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The third thing that we focused on. Okay. So thing number 1 was mobility. Thing number 2 was motor reprogramming. And thing number 3, it's a very important principle when it comes to rehab. And this is a big thing that I see so many people getting wrong because it's counterintuitive, but it's one of the things that really helps here. So I mentioned before how a lot of times when people have pain, they either push through that pain or they try to completely avoid it. And neither of those things are helpful. So what I taught Kevin, which is one of the things I teach all of my clients, is to gently and slowly move into the pain. What that means is we move to the place where that pain starts, where you're on the edge of that pain, and then you pull away from it. You move into it. So it's all about finding the edge of the pain. Move slowly and intentionally with control, with breath, and find that spot or that movement that produces the pain and then come away from it. So the whole goal is not to keep pushing through, because if you are pushing through it, basically you're telling your nervous system, like your nervous system oftentimes will tighten up when you're trying to push through it, which is counterproductive. So we got to get to the edge. We teach our nervous system, this is okay. You're safe here. Nothing's wrong here. And then we're going to relax a little bit. We're going to pull back. Everything is okay. See, look, you thought you were going to have to tense up. You thought you were going to have to protect me. And then we just back away. It's all good. It's all good, right? And so we hold at that edge, we breathe through it to let the nervous system understand that you're safe here, and then we pull back. And as you do that, you will continue to get more and more range. Maybe not all at once, maybe not all in the same exact session, but the more you practice that, you're going to be able to go deeper into that range with less pain.
Yeah, this is like straight psychology. This is exposure therapy.
Yeah.
If you have a phobia, if you have a fear of heights, you don't go skydiving on day 1.
No, thank you. No, thank you. I said, no, thank you.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like a great idea. But like on day 1, if you have a fear of heights and you want to jump off of the high dive at the pool, on day 1, you go to the pool. Like you see that there's a high dive, because if you have a fear of heights, you're already going to freak out. But just the fact that oh, look at that, there's a ladder over there.
Yeah.
And then maybe you get to the point where you can put your hand on the ladder, but you're not even climbing the ladder. Everything gets you to the point where, yeah, this is scary, but I'm in a fearful environment, but I'm still safe. Never just are like, oh, you have a fear of heights? I'm going to drag you to the top of the high dive and shove you off. That's not a great approach.
Really? If you're scared of roller coasters, the approach is not to take your 5-year-old daughter on Thunder Mountain when she's scared? Oh, is that just something that happened to me?
I don't know. I took you on roller coaster.
No. This is my dad. This is what happened to me. This is what my dad did. And then I was deathly afraid of roller coasters for my entire life until I went on a roller coaster with you, basically.
Yeah, I know. And I was worried that we had done that to our own daughter when we took her on
Slinky Dog,
and she was freaking out halfway through.
She was freaking out, but she wants to go back, so we're good.
I know. But that's what it is you can't overexpose. That's just going to be too much, and it's going to lead to, in your case, fear of roller coasters for a long time.
Yeah.
But in the case of the body, if you give it too much exposure, it's going to freak out, and all of the muscles around it, like everything's going to get so tensed. You're going backwards then. Like that was the problem right after I hurt myself, is all of the muscles were so tense that it was like, what is the actual issue going on? I didn't know. You did. Yeah. But I had no idea because everything felt tense. So I wasn't even sure what to deal with because everything was so exposed. If you're like, oh, no pain, no gain, push through everything, you're just going to get to a place where everything is now pain. But complete avoidance is a terrible aspect also, which
Yeah,
again,
and that goes back to the story that you told earlier about the podcast that you were listening to. Oh, okay, I'm good. I don't have a herniated disc. I can go back into the gym. A lot of times when you know that there's not like it's not as bad as your brain is making it out to be, then you can push through certain things knowing that we're going to be okay here. And so I always put a threshold on it. I always tell my patients, I don't want you ever above a 5 out of 10 when we're doing this type of thing. There's some people that come in at a 6, a 7, an 8 out of 10. That's different stories. That's not where Kevin was in this. Kevin was like, I was like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to push to the edge of the pain. I don't want it increasing above a 5, never above a 5. We want to kind of keep it where it is or have it decrease. And then the same thing applied when it came to Kevin's running, because that's another piece that we really want to talk about as well is how do we know when it's okay to run? And that's one of the big rule of thumbs that I keep with Kevin, with myself, with a lot of people that I work with is really understanding, okay, is running going to make the pain worse? And this is one thing that like even we've done with our cross country runners and other things because we as runners want to be active. We want to be out on the roads. We want to be doing things. We don't want to just rest and not do anything. And completely resting and not doing things is oftentimes unhelpful, except in the case of a bone stress injury. I will say that always over and over again. If you have a stress fracture or any sort of potential bone stress injury, that is definitely the time that you need full and complete rest. And that doesn't mean you can't cross train. You might still be able to, depending on what part of your body is involved, you might still be able to ride a bike or go swimming or doing other things. There's ways to stay active, but impact activities are a definite no when it comes to bone stress injuries. But with Kevin and getting back to running, you want to kind of tell like how we approach this? I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking.
I just wanted to go run.
Yeah.
But to me, this was very similar in coming back from hernia surgery. Is running post hernia surgery hurt? And so I just kept walking. And I would do it over and over. And eventually, and I would never come back and be like, oh man, I feel good. I was better than when I left. It was so frustrating because I just wanted to go out and run. And running was uncomfortable, so I kept taking walking breaks. Every time the pain would elevate, I'd be like, oh, it hurts almost immediately on my first running step. And it finally got to a point where you were like, just try running for a couple of minutes and see if it relaxes. And so what was happening to me when I first started running, I started too soon. And then I took a few more off days and then we started working together. And then when I started running, the pain was not immediate and shooting. And it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't throwing my running form off.
Yeah.
When I was trying to treat myself and then be like, oh no, I can do it. I could go for a run. I was like awkwardly hobbling. I was landing hard on my left leg and then like swinging the right leg through, but winging it out to the side. I was not moving correctly. When we started working together, after just a few days, I could go off and easily run. I was running on flat ground. I was running my normal loops. I was making sure that what I was on wasn't pitched awkwardly off to the side. The road tilts excessively so that it can drain properly.
Yeah.
I was making sure that what I was on was pretty much.
Yep.
And I kept it shorter than my cardio said. I kept it as much as I knew was the appropriate thing to do, not as much as my brain wanted to do, not as much as my breathing was going to allow, but as much as my back was actually going to allow.
Yeah, and I think that's important is understanding that it is important to sometimes pull back. It doesn't mean that you have to rest completely, but we cut it. You're not doing your full load, especially at the beginning. The first couple of runs out, the instructions were essentially go out and do half, at least no more than half of what you normally would go out and run. So for Kevin, your typical weekday run is probably around 7-ish miles, right? 7-8 miles. Yep. And so at the beginning, it was like, oh, go out and run 3 miles, but see how you feel on that first mile. I always tell people, check the first mile. If the pain is increasing, you stop. If the pain is the same, not really too bad, it's more of a discomfort, but not a pain, you can keep going. But then he cut it, had shorter runs the first couple of runs back, and then the pain was fine. Then we always checked with how did you feel on the run? And then how did you feel after the run as well? Because that also matters. Because if there's an excess amount of pain after the run, that's a sign from your body that you did too much. Okay. So we always had to manage progression of things based on how he responded both during and after the run.
Yeah, and I was never in pain after. I always felt tightened afterwards.
Yeah.
I was always like, I should go back and do some more mobility after, because it felt just because the muscles were tired. So then you get the fatigue and then everything just tightens up to try and make sure that I'm not going to hurt myself. But it never brought pain from the running.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how we handled it. Okay. Those were the 3 big main things that we did. That's how we progressed his running. And then within 2 weeks, he's back to running essentially 7 miles per day. He did a 14-mile run this weekend with no pain, and he's feeling good. You tell them in your words, like how you're feeling right now, because you're not 100% normal at this point, but you're pretty darn close, right?
It causes I don't feel my back when I run.
Yeah.
At all. I can still feel it like when I first wake up in the morning. I wake up stiff. I wake up a little leaky in my back, but it goes away relatively quickly if I sit for a very long period of time. But I feel like that's the case for most people. If you sit for a couple of hours,
because think about what's happening at your hips, right? Your hips, like those hip flexors are tightening and they're shortening, and that's putting pressure on the front of your spine. Now you understand why sitting for excessive amounts of time is problematic.
I know. Now I have to go do a psoas release, and I'm not really excited about it.
And then we also talked about moving forward too, which we don't have time to get into today, but maybe we'll do another episode about that, of like when Kevin does do his longer runs, what kind of mobility exercises should he be doing throughout the run to make sure that those muscles are not all tightening up and he stays loose.
Yeah, and I'm going to give that an attempt this weekend. So we'll see how that goes.
We'll see how it goes. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and say it early. Happy early birthday, Kevin. I know you love all of the attention. And by that, I mean, he does not at all. But this episode is being released on July 9th. So your birthday is a couple days away. And I just want to say happy early birthday. And I hope that you're feeling better and all is well. And you can do some fun running adventure on your birthday. Might not, even if it's not exactly what you had in mind, because Kevin loves to do very interesting things on his birthday.
I'm going to attempt what I have in mind and be happy with whatever the results are.
There we go. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you found this podcast helpful, we would love it so much and appreciate if you could leave us a review on Spotify, make a comment, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, share the episode with a friend. You can also check out our YouTube channel, because we're going to be uploading a recording of this so you can watch us on Zoom as well. And as always, thanks for joining us. This has been the Real Life Runners Podcast, episode number 469. Now get out there and run your life.